So again, everyone, welcome to Renaming Project Standards using Ideate BIMLink. My name is Richard Taylor with Ideate Software. I'm joined by my amazing coworker and colleague, Sash Kazaminajad, who's going to be helping me with questions today.
Thanks, Richard. Appreciate you having me here, and thank you, everybody, for joining.
So you might have seen this flash by really quickly. I'll just have it up here for a second. My background is in architecture. I've had over 20 years of Revit experience. I was fortunate enough to be one of the original people at Revit Technology before Autodesk acquired it. And then I worked for Autodesk for about 12 years as one of the Revit product managers. And I've been working for Ideate Software for a little over 5 years. So you can always contact me. I'm always happy to contact people or to connect with people on LinkedIn or on Twitter or on Facebook. So Ideate Software is all about simplifying your Revit data challenges. We create 5 add-on solutions for Revit that you see there on the screen. Ideate BIMLink, ID8 Explorer, Ideate Sticky, Ideate Apps, and Ideate Style Manager. And today we're going to be focusing on Ideate BIMLink. So before we begin our main presentation, I just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background information that all of our 5 solutions have both the in-product help and getting started guides, as well as online help. We are supporting the last 4 releases of Revit. So you see there Revit 2021 back through 2018. So I highlight 2021 because all of our solutions are now updated and available on 2021. But we also updated 2020, 19, and 18 at the same time. So if you are using one of those versions that you see on the screen, make sure you go to our software website and update because we have new versions for all 5 of our tools. And then we're testing on large projects. We're doing a lot of work with BIM 360. So we're well known for having these really large, complex projects and data. So I'm going to go over here and start with BIMLink. And so Ideate BIMLink is what we're focusing on today. And I wanted to kind of give a little backstory here real quickly, is that BIMLink last year turned 10. So happy birthday to BIMLink. It's been proven Revit productivity and return on investment. In fact, recently we've focused on our website on a number of ROI type workflows. So I just wanted to highlight that. And so if you do have the time, I'm going to switch over here to our library. And if you go to Ideate Software, actually under Solutions, BIMLink, you can actually note there's a new link here called ROI. And you can see all the great sort of workflows that are supported. And we did a survey, and I don't have a lot of time to talk about this, but there's a lot of great information on this webpage about the return on investment for Ideate BIMLink. So I just wanted to mention that, and the fact that it's 10 years old, we have to celebrate the birthday. So Ideate BIMLink is all about the data control and the parameters and the information within the Revit model. So it allows you to take all of that data that we have stored in the Revit model, export that to Excel, be able to make manipulations and changes, and then import that data back into Revit for updating both the data as well as the model geometry, because sometimes that data basically controls the geometry. So you may say to yourself, well, why would I want to work with Excel? Well, hopefully I'll show you some examples of like renaming that you can highlight multiple cells, you can cut and paste, you can search and find, you can do a lot of formulas, which is really the powerful, I think, feature of Excel, being able to use those formulas and be able to fill in data, as you see there, concatenate, search and replace, and then make quick work of it and then import it back. And the Revit schedules don't support a lot of this. As you notice, with the Revit schedule, you have to kind of do it line by line. There's no easy way to select multiple cells or multiple lines in the Revit schedule to update this information. So Ideate BIMLink is so much more than just an export to Excel and make manipulations and then import back, even though that's kind of what I started with. But we support so many different workflows for revision data, for being able to manage information that's just not available actually in Revit schedules. And so today, though, we're focused on this particular webinar on renaming families and types and just basically renaming information with Ideate BIMLink. So I want to show you a couple examples of that as we go through, but I also wanted to showcase that we have a lot of other workflows, which I will talk about when we come to our sort of links. So Ideate BIMLink ships with about, I think, 300 or 400 link definitions. And you'll see a link definition is basically just the properties or parameters that you'd like to send out to Excel and make changes or manipulate or review within Excel. And so those links allow you to get started very quickly. They're very easily customizable. You can actually have them as part of your template, your Revit template for your projects. So today, though, we're going to be focusing mostly on 3 of these dozens of libraries. And that is the library for project standards, which is mostly about quality assurance. The library for quality control, QC, which is mostly about sort of updating instance data. And then I'm going to talk about a new category or folder that we've added called Health Check. So I'm going to come back to this or circle back to this at the end of the presentation. So the first folder is called Project Standards, and most of these are really about QA, quality assurance. It's basically allowing you to sort of prevent problems before they occur, mostly about type and style control. Now, there are some instance links, but most of them are type links, which I'll show you in a moment. Now, in Revit, if just sort of basic Revit, you have the ability to look at some of this QA control when it comes to like the templates, right? The families that you may, the loadable families, the RFAs that you have within your project. You can control some of this with view templates and object styles and groups, but that's sort of the limit of what you have so that Ideate BIMLink can really help you manage these project standards. And you see there's some examples there on the screen, all the way from assembly codes down to viewport types. So like I said, that's mainly about the type, right? The type information for all of these project standards. Now, when it comes to quality control, again, sort of it's mostly about fixing issues that maybe have already occurred, or maybe going back and fixing individual instances of items. So like, for instance, the view list or sheet lists as an example. Now, there are, again, some QC tools within Revit. We've got, schedules, we've got work set visibility, filters, even the project browser where you can go and rename things. But most of that is sort of tedious because you're doing it sort of one item at a time, and you're not able to update this or update the information very easily and quickly. And also not able to reference other pieces of data, which I'm going to show you in a second. And again, this is mostly about instance type of information or instance sort of data or properties. So what we're going to do is thought I'd give you a couple renaming examples today, or I guess a few. What's 3? 3 is a few, I guess, more than 2. So we're going to rename families. I'm going to use specifically doors. And then we're going to do some QC. So I've got a whole series of views that I need to kind of go back and say that, oh, these don't match my standards. People created these views all over the place with these weird names. I want to go and match some standards. And then also I thought I'd show you some renaming spaces because it's a good example of how you might want to reference other pieces of data. In this case, we're referencing the room information from the architect's linked model, but we're going to be using that to rename the spaces according to the linked information. So that's another powerful aspect of Ideate BIMLink, is being able to reference the LinkedIn information. Okay, so I've droned on for quite a while. Let's take a closer look and actually show Revit here. So let's switch over here to Revit. And today I'm using Revit 2021, but as I said earlier, all of our solutions are available on the last 4 releases of Revit. So if you want to access any of the Ideate software tools, you'll go to Ideate Software, and you'll see now I've got all of the Ideate software solutions loaded. So for our task today, we're going to go over here to Ideate BIMLink, and I purposely removed all of the links in this project, the sort of predefined links that I might have had in my template, because I wanted to show you how to create some. So you might be, the first time you start Ideate BIMLink, you might be looking at this particular dialog with no links, right? So how do you get around that? How do you create a link? Well, we're going to go to New, and here is where there are three options. You can browse our libraries, you can create a new link by a specific category, or you can use an existing schedule. Today, I'm going to be browsing the libraries. And as I said, we're going to be really concentrating on the project standards and the QC links. Now, if you don't know where something is located, this is another nice tip, is you can just highlight the top level folder, and you can come over here to the search, make sure this little tick mark says include files and subfolders. And I might say, well, gee, my task today is to rename things. So you just type in rename, and you can see that, oh, there's duct systems rename, piping not rename, project standards rename. Oh, that's what I really want. Oh, so that's under project standards. So of course I can access it through here, but I might also want to just show you that if I come over here to project standards and clear my search, here are the available items within project standards. Now, as you go through and you click on each one of these, it's going to give you a short description, like renamed filled regions, right? Assign color and weight. So if I want to come down to materials, edit material names as an example, or, I wanted to edit tag types. So each one of these has an explanation. So if we come over here to the rename types, it's basically renaming all of the family name and type information. And obviously it's a type link. Like I said, most of these are type. In this case, the view template ones, because the view templates are instance as far as naming. So that's a little bit different, but most of them are type links. And we do separate the information, the data, between an instance parameter and a type parameter, although they can be exported to the same Excel spreadsheet with a different tab. So, but we do sort of break those apart as far as the parameters go. So I'm going to say next, I'm going to use this default link, right? And so it comes up, it's a multi-category link by default. It basically has every category, which I could rename every category here, but I thought that's a little much for a demonstration. So what I'm going to do is uncheck all of the categories. And I'm just going to go over here, as I mentioned in my PowerPoint, I'm just going to do doors. So I'm going to select on doors, and you'll see there are the doors that are available to me. And the doors you see, I have them over here in the project browser. These are the families that I have loaded within this project. And I realize that they don't match my standards for this particular project, right? So I can come back here to properties, and you can see that I'm looking at the category, the family name, the type mark. I can add other pieces of information. Like I said, this is very customizable. Like if I wanted to add the description, I could do that as well. Or, maybe I don't. Like, again, it's very similar to like a Revit schedule where you can just add properties and remove properties. So when I say done, now I'm going to export that information to Excel. And I'll just keep the default name, and I'm going to open up the file. And so now in Excel, I have the same columns A through E. A will always be the Revit Element ID, and that's how we're keeping track of this information. So that's a Revit read-only property. As you see, it's gray. The same way the category in this case is gray. We're not able to change it. But everything in white is able to be edited and changed. So in my task, I might want to use some Excel formulas. So what I say is, this project is called the Audubon Center. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to start with an equal sign. And I'm going to say, I would like these to all be, let's say, AC dash, and then I'm going to add C2, which is the name, right? So it says, there it is, AC barn door double panel. Oh, I forgot. I really want to also standardize this, and I want to have all these be uppercase. So again, in Excel, I'll just go ahead and select that. So now that's the AC barn door double panel. All right, that's great for the first one, right? C2. What about all the others? Well, you can just grab on this little handle here in Excel, and I can say, oh, let's pull this down, and that applies that formula to everything. So now all of them start with the word or with the letters AC. So I'm going to copy the information here, and I'm going to paste it over to C, because C is sort of like that's the live column. That's what we're looking at, family name here. So in it, also, I may want to change the type, right? So I'm going to come over here and I'll say equals, and we'll do that is D2, and we'll say and I'll do a dash. I'll just put AC on the end just to show you that we can do that. And again, come over here to there's my opening. And again, I might want to say, oh, you know what? I want that to be upper. And let's put those in parentheses. Oops, I got a space there. There we go. Okay, now, once I get that correct, right, of the formula that I want, I'm going to bring that down. And again, copy. And we'll come over here and we'll paste the information, the values of that I had. So I kind of use this space over to the right as a scratch pad, if you will. I'm doing formulas, I'm updating information, and then I'm kind of filling in the information over here, right? Now, another thing that you may have is for COBie standards, or maybe for particular standards, you say that, you know what, there shouldn't be any spaces. So what I can do is highlight from starting with column C2, I'm going to come over here and highlight this information, and I'm going to say, you know what, I'm going to do a Control F, and I'm going to search and replace. So find a space and replace it with a dash, as an example, replace all. And so it did 162. But you know, when I notice that and then actually look at some of the things, I'm like, oh, well, what it did is in this case, it has 3 dashes there. Maybe that's not what I want. So I'm going to do where it's here, 3 dashes, replace all. And then also there was a couple that were 2. And so I'm going to replace all. So now I have everything that there's no spaces, they're all dashes, and everything looks good. So I'm going to save this. Now, also I'm going to do 2 things to show you the power of Ideate BIMLink and the fact that it gives you a lot of information when even if you make a mistake, I guess is what I'm saying. It's giving you lots of feedback. So I already told you this was a read-only category, right? The doors. I'm going to type in Windows because I don't care. I'm going to make that change, all right? And I did this when I was playing around with this. I accidentally changed the name, and I'm going to change this family name to a dash. Okay? So I'm going to come back over here to BIMLink, and I'm going to import. And I'm going to pick from that project standards rename types. And lo and behold, I get an error. Because what it does is it matches the top of the column. You see here, ID, category, category. Well, look at this, family dash name as opposed to family space name. So that's why I wanted to show you this. It's important if you're doing search and replace, you might accidentally do what I did and replace a space with a dash, and then that's actually that's what it's looking at is this row 1 to match the parameter names within Revit. So as soon as I make a space there, I'm going to save that, and then I'll come back here and show you. So now I can import, and I'm going to say project standards renames, and now it will go through and give me, again, some information after it makes these sort of updates to the data within Revit. So that's what's nice. Also, you're going to see in a second here that there's a warning for that item that we tried to change, basically, which was, in this case, if I untick this show messages, they're like, hey, oh, that Revit property was read-only. That was the window or the door that I tried to change as the category to a window. So it's telling me it can't do it. And the great thing about this is that it doesn't just fail, right? It just says, I'm not going to do that. That's a Revit read-only property. The same way, for instance, if something is owned by another person or it's locked for work sharing, it doesn't just crash the import. It's just telling you that it's not going to make those changes. So I'm fine with that. And then I can see up above in yellow everything that's been changed, right? Now, nothing happens or nothing has been done yet. This is sort of a preview. As you see over to the left in the project browser, the doors have not been renamed. But as soon as I review the information and I say, okay, this looks good, I'm going to hit import, watch the project browser, everything updates over there. And so now if I come down here to the AC single FL1H, you see all the types. So we've got the AC dash, in front of all the doors are uppercase with no spaces, and the types now are all organized the way that we want. So again, really easy to update this information. Like I said, I just did the doors, but there's, you can do this for any of the families or types. So let's come back over here to BIMLink again. And again, I wanted to show you, let's go over here and say new. And the same way, let's search for views. So we type in views, and there's a lot of views here. You see that you can actually create new views. As I kind of expand this, there's editing the scope and depth queuing, legends. But again, there's several QC ones. Views compare, there's view naming, interior audit. This view naming, that's really what I want. I kind of want to review all these view names. Okay, list of the views with the with spaces within the view name, right? So that's the one I want, and again, it's under QC. So I'm just going to go over to quality control here just to show you that here's under the ones. If I clear that, here are all the quality control ones, and there's that view naming. So let's go, and again, as I mentioned, it's an instance link as opposed to the type link which we were just looking at. So let's say next. All right, so it lists all the views in the project. And again, this information has the view name, the family and type, the sheet number, the sheet name. I can add other adjacent information. As you see, if I wanted to add phase information, like the phase name of the view, I could add that as well. So that's really nice that I can pull from a sort of adjacent categories or adjacent sort of pieces of information. Now, this is a lot of views, right? And so just for this demonstration purposes here, I'm going to come over to my filter, right? And it's already been filtered on where it's sort of editable. But I want to say, well, you know what? I would like the family and type where it contains the word floor plan. So I type in floor plan, and not much happens. Well, because this is an OR filter. It's an OR condition. It's either view name contains this, blank, or I should say editable, or family and type contains floor plan. If I tick this elements must pass all filters, it's an AND condition. So it's very powerful that we can have both OR as well as AND conditions here in our filters. And so now I'm looking at just the floor plans, right? So now I'm going to say done, and we're going to export this to our QC view names, and we're going to open up the file again, just like we did before. So here's all the views, and you can see that there's a number of views that have not yet been placed. I'm only going to change the ones that have been placed on sheets, and that's why I wanted to have this sort of other information, right? So it's showing me the view name, but it's also showing me if it's been placed on a sheet. So in this case, I'm going to come over here and use that information, that referencing information, and we're going to call that, it's D8, and we're going to add to that a little dash. Make sure I get the double quotes, and add to that B8. So what that does is, all it does is just add the the sheet number before the view. And maybe again, that's my standards or something, or I want to go back and make sure that they're all updated. So I'm going to copy that information again, and we will then go over here and paste the information back. And so paste the values back. So now we have this information. You can see I can change the family and type if I want. I can change the phase. They're all under new construction, but I'll leave that all the same for right now, and just say save, and then come back over here and import from my QC views naming and open that up. So now there were no errors. Excellent. And I can scroll down here and see like what was changed. I'm going to import that. And you can see that if I come back over to my project browser under floor plans, there were a number of them that were renamed. There's some here like roof, clear story, and site plan that have not been, because they have not been placed on a sheet. Another way that you can do that really nice and quickly is if you have ID8 Explorer, you can bring up ID8 Explorer just to show you a nice little sort of synopsis here. If I come over to the entire project, we're going to navigate, and we navigate automatically to views that have not been on a sheet that are floor plan views. There are 14 of them. And sure enough, those are the 14 that I just renamed perfectly, because they have the sheet name in front of them and then the view name afterwards. So this is another great way to sort of not verify all the information very easily. So now let's go, my last sort of example was, again, referencing some information from a linked model. So we're going to go back to a different model here. This is the hospital project from Autodesk. And so I'm in the MEP model, but I'm referencing or linked in the architectural model. And there are a number of rooms and there's some spaces that have already been placed, but I want to rename those spaces per some information within the rooms, right? So let's again go over here to Ideate BIMLink. And you'll see this one, I have some rooms to spaces create, but there's also this QC space rename. And so the properties of that, if you look at, it has the number or name of the space, but also the room number and room name. And so this is really nice, is the fact that you can, again, include these linked elements here, right? And you can go over and specify that, okay, this is information for spaces, right? If I want to include that, but in this case, it's automatically getting the rooms from the linked model. So if I say okay and export, and we'll give it the same name, that's good, and open up that file. And so this is a nice example, again, of using sort of reference information, right? So as you see here, because it's in the linked model, all these room names, I can't change them, they're grayed out. And that's, I always say it's the law of Revit, in the sense that we're not able to modify elements or items that are within a linked model, but we can report on them. And so these are the space names, and they are in the MEP model, so they are able to be updated. So as an example, maybe what I want to do is say, oh, well, you know what? I want to have SP, or let's say equals, and we'll do SP dash, if I hit the right thing here. Yeah. SP dash quotes, and then we're going to do the F2. So I basically said that's coming from the linked model exam, and I'm just adding SP to it. So we're going to go over here and come down, and actually you'll see a lot of these are the same, or I think most of them are the same, but just in case they weren't, let's go ahead and copy that, and then again we'll paste the values back over here. So let's go right and paste the values to update that information. We're going to save that, and then again we'll come back over here and we'll import that information. So that was our space renames. And so now you see that that Revit property has been changed. I'm going to import that, and then we're going to go to this mechanical floor plan, and you'll see that now they all have SP. There are some that don't, because those were ones that I either filtered out. In fact, I forgot to mention to you, I have filtered out some of these in the case of the QC space rename, the properties. There were rooms that were unoccupied. So under the filters, I basically said the room does not contain unoccupied, and it does not have a value set. So I did filter out some of that information coming from the architect's model. So that's why it's a good way for me, again, to QC these, to say, oh, what do I have? What spaces are really there? What spaces are relevant? What spaces are coming from the architect's model? Okay, let's go back over here. And so I promised that I'd talk just real briefly about the health check. That's another folder that we added in the May 2020 release. And the health check folder are more things like, yes, you can rename some things, but it's more about looking at the dimensions, levels, standards, let's say model lines, revision clouds, as you see here. There is a views, but it's mostly about, are the views correct? So again, sometimes there's some overlaps in some of these folders and these link definitions, but I wanted to just briefly talk about that, since that is a new folder that you'll see within the May 2020 release. And then I also wanted to talk about that we can create new elements as well. So even though this webinar is all about renaming things, I just wanted to highlight that Ideate BIMLink can actually create new rooms, new spaces, new views, new sheets, as well as rename them. And then my colleague who's on the line here, Sash, has created some recent videos that are awesome that talk about easy elevation naming. And what we're doing is we're actually exporting out the orientation, so you can specify the internal or the the interior elevations. So whether it's north, south, east, west, and you're able to rename those. So in fact, I'm going to switch over here again really quickly to this. If you go to the ID8 BIMLink video library, you'll see the sort of most current ones that we have here. And this easy elevation naming management using ID8 BIMLink is an excellent recent addition that Sash has done. Also, he did managing custom sheet indexes, which is allowing you to rename some of the information. So again, this kind of combinations of different workflows here. The same way with the rooms to spaces, it's basically what I showed you, but instead of renaming things, it's actually creating the spaces from the linked model room information. And then you can also either create sheets or rename those sheets. But I wanted to highlight those videos because those were probably the most relevant to what we're talking about today. Of course, you can learn more on our online help. This example here was just learning how to create elements. So if you want to know how to do things, you can go over to the online help and say, well, how would I create a new element with an ID8 BIMLink? Also, Google is your friend. If you just Google search things like ID8 BIMLink create, it'll come up with a number of help topics, which is really helpful. And before I go on, I want to see if there are any questions. It looks like there are no questions, Sash. Is that correct?
Yeah, Richard. Hey. We'll have to. It looks like one just came in. It says if you wanted the family save name on your server with this. Okay, let me try this again. If you wanted the family save name in your server to be the same as what it is in the project, would you have to save the families one by one? And so right now, like if you do go in,
yeah, right here you can say save at the top level, or at any one of these top levels, you can say save, and it's going to save out all of them, all of the RFA family files. So once you've renamed everything, then if you wanted to match what you have on the server, you would have to go and save out your families. But you can do that. If you do here, I think if you're doing this, it's one by one, right? So you can see there should be. Oh, I
you
guess
have to basically.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. Let me see. Oh, that's a system family. Let's see. Floor. Yeah.
Nope.
Flex ducts. Yeah, all these are like system families. Let me see. They're actually, well, because I'm in the architecture model. Oh, let's go over here. Yeah, let's cancel that. And let's go to, here we are with our doors. There, I should be able to go to this one, right, and save off. But it's saving this and its individual types. If I wanted everything, I have to go up here to families and then say save.
Yeah, and Brian, it's nice to have Brian on the line here. He brings up a very good point. He says, be careful when you save from the project as things like materials will be saved into families. So he's absolutely right about that. Whenever you save that out, you get a lot more information from the project that could also end up getting saved in there. And then one of the things that also to be careful of when you do that is like, I'll take the drywall detail component as a good example. If you take the default drywall component that Revit ships with, it gives you way more drywall types than you'd probably ever use. But the problem is if you bring that in and then you purge out the types that you don't want, if you then take that family and save it and overwrite it, you're going to lose those types from the original family. So you have to be very careful whenever you save families out, that you could either add more info than you want or lose info. My guess is you'll get both worlds. You'll add and lose data as well. So be very careful with that.
Right. And another person had asked a question about like are the limitations of ID8 BIMLink. I always say the limitations are really Revit limitations, meaning that we don't allow with an ID8 BIMLink to do anything that you couldn't by default do within Revit. And a good example of that is, like I said, editing the link, right? In Revit, you're not able to change linked data. We can report on it, but we can't change it. So we're sort of adhering to the laws of Revit, as I say. So that's really the limitations, is that if Revit's not able to do something like that, like you asked about room phases, I'm trying to think, Sash, do rooms, I thought that was rooms did not have phase.
That they are assigned the phase and hard coded the phase once you bring it in. So we have no way of changing the phase of a room because of the limitation in Revit. And so, no, we can't. You know, obviously, if we could get around it, we probably would. But as you know, when you bring a room in to Revit, whatever phase you're on, when you drop that room in there, if you click on the room afterwards, the phase information shows up, but it's grayed out. And so I'm sure, Richard, if you were to go to a floor plan and click on a room, it should show the phase, but it should show it as grayed out. So we won't be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I've done things like copy and paste the rooms across, you know, that whole bit. So just something to kind of keep in mind.
Right.
And then oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, please go.
Yeah, there was another great question here, you know, and this is actually one of the things I may have wanted to mention. I think that, yeah, see right there, phase is grayed. Yep. Is there a way in BIMLink to specify formulas to bring in with Excel-like tables to auto-populate the rows with formulas applied? One of the things I wanted to mention that I absolutely love about BIMLink when it comes to like formulas is, and actually I think my view elevation renaming blog post that Richard just pointed on has a little of that information. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll have a separate tab in the Excel file that has some formulas.
Correct.
And you can either copy and paste those formulas into the main data editing area if you want to, or you could use those formulas to read from this tab and then report information or do whatever work you want it to do in that Excel file. And what's really great about that is if you are, let's say, doing work in BIMLink and you export out the data and you pick the Excel file that has that tab that Richard's highlighting plus your formulas in there, BIMLink will say, hey, I found a tab or a worksheet in there called QC-space rename. Would you like to overwrite it? And what that does is it will actually rewrite that first tab in there, and it won't overwrite the Excel file, which means you preserve the formulas tab.
Right.
And so if your formula is set up to read data from a certain column, it will automatically then re-report that information with the new data. And a good example, if you ever want to see stuff very similar to this, would be to check out like our like QTO spreadsheet, which is actually made up of a pivot table that reads the raw data from that was exported from BIMLink. And then the second tab has the pivot table that summarizes the quantities from the first tab. So you can keep overwriting that worksheet tab, and the pivot table will continue to update.
And our revision schedule, our revision examples also has some, I think, a separate tab where that will have some information that will update as well through a macro.
That's exactly it. So if you're totally into macros and pivot tables, you should check out the help files that Richard's kind of pointing to, and also our sample content. There's some good information in there. I always like to say BIMLink is not just about taking data out and editing it and bringing it back in. It's taking the data out of your model and doing whatever else you need to outside of it. So those are good examples.
And then does it work? There's a question about, does it work with Excel tables? I guess like you said, the pivot tables, as an example, if that's what your question was, be able to sort of take the data and massage it the way you want to have it look with a pivot table within Excel.
Or also, when you can select all your columns and rows and make a table out of it, so you can filter and sort, where you kind of have the color code, you have the blue table and it's blue and light blue. So you should be able to do that as well. We don't do that by default when you export the data to Excel, but we do have people certainly doing that stuff. I think the key thing, and Richard, I think you kind of pointed this out, is to not reorder your columns, like move columns of data around, because we rely on the element ID numbers and the order of the columns.
Yeah. Well, that's why, and it has to match, and both the order as well as the text, right? And you saw that when the text didn't match, I got an error. I'll get the same error if it's out of alignment, like if I move column B to C, or so it's looking at basically the columns in Excel left to right along the top, and it's reviewing them with an ID8 BIMLink, as you see here. If I go to just any BIMLink definition here, like this QC view naming the properties, it's looking at it from top to bottom. So it's going view name, family and type, sheet number, sheet name, phase name, and this is going to be in Excel, the far left one next to the element ID, then family and type, then so forth. And so if these get out of order, you'll get an error as well. So you could add things in the Excel file, but as long as they match over here on this side as well.
Yep. There was one other, oh, go ahead, Richard. Sorry.
No, please.
I did want to maybe just talk one more thing, looking at Ron's question again about the formulas. It's a really interesting question. Like, for example, sometimes we get questions from people, hey, if I export this data out, will it take the formulas, with it? And the answer is no. That information drops out, but a lot of times that's okay. And the reason why is you may have a calculated value that's taking one parameter and another one, and doing the calculations for you. We don't always necessarily need that info in the Excel file. Sometimes people do like it, but the reality is when you edit the data and bring it back in, the calculation will automatically recalculate for you because it's done in a schedule. But also vice versa, like if you do calculations in the Excel file, that stuff doesn't come through and create the formula for you in your schedules. And there's a variety of reasons why, but the Excel formulas and Revit formulas aren't always necessarily one-to-one or exactly the same, and so I could see that just being a huge mess.
So yeah, that's why when I was cutting and pasting, I was really cutting and pasting the values that resulted from the formula that I did. So as long as you're reviewing the values, that's really what it's updating.
Yep.
Well, I know it is great. Yeah, great questions. Thank you so much. I went a little bit long, so I apologize, but I do have one last question for all of you. And the question is if you could please spend just a few minutes, it's actually probably a few seconds, really. It's like 3 very short questions. So when the webinar is finished, you'll get a little message that'll say, would you like to fill out this survey? It really helps us focus these webinars, we're trying to do more workflow based webinars when it comes to our solutions. So like in this case, specifically renaming with ID8 BIMLink. So I'd really appreciate if you had the time to fill that out. And with that, I think we have said thank you so much for your questions and so much for your attention. This webinar will be, it is being recorded, and it will be available on our website. And I want to thank my colleague Sash for helping me out with such great answers to the questions.
Great job, Richard, and thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your attendance today and your support.
Yep. Have a good day, and remember when you're using ID8 BIMLink to tell it happy birthday, because it likes that. It's 10 years old. Now it's almost 11. Well, it's going on 11. So, all right. Thanks, everyone.